Welcome to this session on equitable and hiring recruitment practices. I am your presenter today. My name is Monique Ellington. I am the Director of Equity and Community Strategy at Service Your Alliance. Just to tell you a little bit about my background, in my role at Service Your Alliance, we're a nonprofit organization relentlessly pursuing a bold vision, making a service year a common expectation for an opportunity for all young Americans. In my role as the director, I'm currently leading our organizational planning and implementation strategy to advance equity in service years. At this point, I'm really working to understand the systemic barriers that have hindered or may prevent the full participation of all groups in service year programs, that is AmeriCorps or core-based models. I work directly with service year programs in particular to implement diverse, inclusive, and equitable practices. So today we're going to just take some time to go through a few things. So I thought it would just be good and fitting to kind of frame our session. I'm hoping in this session we will really work through and examine some common recruitment practices that perpetuate inequities in our hiring processes. Perhaps even identify some best practices for recruiting and retaining diverse candidates. And then lastly, really exploring ways to really improve our existing systems, our structures, our practices, and policies in hiring processes. Before we can dive kind of deeper into what those recruitment strategies should look like, I thought it would be befitting for us to really just set the stage of where things are in America and why are we talking about equity today in a recruitment process. So I know we probably have seen this or some form of this statement on any hiring application. What really promotes equal opportunity. We also have a commission, the EEOC, that is really looking to ensure that people are not discriminated against on the basis of their race, their color, religion, sex, national origin, disability status, genetics, sexual orientation, gender identity, expressions. And so you've probably seen some sort of statement like this during your time of applying for applications or even recruiting for candidates for open positions that you may have. What we have found is that if this was in place and has been in place really since the start of 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, when it was passed, we have now about 208 years of history in American employee rights. However, we're still at a place today in 2019 where we're having a conversation about equity. So, why are we having this conversation? What are we hoping to gain? And one of the things that we have to understand about our culture here in America is that structural and system inequities exist and are prevalent and working through every part of our country. It's actually baked into the American fabric. It emerges in systems that include our housing, education, banking and financing, criminal justice, and definitely in our recruitment processes. This data here I pulled from the US Department of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and really wanted to just kind of dive a little bit deeper into what do we understand today about our current unemployment rates. And as you can see here from this chart, which was created in 2017, the latest data that they have available, that there is predominantly more African Americans and American Indians that and Alaskan Natives as well, that are about 8%. 8% of the unemployment rate when the overall average at that time was 4.4. So as you can see, there are various different disparities just on the basis of race when we look at this particular data. And this particular slide, I kind of wanted to give us a picture of where are various people from different backgrounds or racial ethnicity, where are they placed within an organization? And I borrowed this information from Promise 54, which they've done an analysis of over 200 organizations, whether they are nonprofit organizations, whether they are financial organizations that have completed a survey. And what we found is that there are probably more whites serving on boards, executive teams, and then there's a little bit more of differences in staff. But for the most part, what we can glean from this page is that there are far more white Americans in leadership roles versus any other nationality or race or ethnicity. Some of the practices that we've seen that are constantly perpetuated, and some of the issues that often affect our common inequities in our practices, is that there are a lot of things that take into account. I used to say to when I was doing recruiting is that people hire people that they like, and people hire people that look like them. And it's amazing how that manifests in the work that we do, especially when we're thinking about inequities that exist in our practices. One of the key ones that I've seen so often is an over-reliance on education. A lot of times jobs don't particularly, or the responsibilities needed for the job don't actually require a higher education, but it has become so standardized that a four-year degree is accepted. And if we start to think about the positions in which we're applying for and understand what the skill set is that is necessary for someone to be successful in that role, does it actually require a four-year degree? Sometimes it's often that there's been several years since someone has actually been in school, but they may have had 10 years of experience post graduating and have the ability to really kind of jump into specific roles and get the ball running just from recent information, just from the experiences that they recently had. Other areas of common and equitable practices is our own stereotypes, biases, and microaggressions. It's really important that we kind of put those things in checks. And some of those things are unconscious. It could be the way in which we grew up. It could be the types of people that we were around growing up that have shaped our views and opinions of people that sometimes prevents us from actually getting the best candidate into the role that we're seeking to fill, mainly because of our own issues or the way in which we're thinking. I had a gentleman once before, and I was helping him with his recruiting processes, and he was trying to recruit from communities of color and could not really understand, while some of the individuals were coming in not dressed in a suit, but in some cases they may have not had positions in that where it required a certain attire. It also could have been that where he was recruiting from, they may not have been educated in that particular manner. So just being conscious of what stories and opinions that we form about people, which really kind of brings me to my next point about like the quirks and the pet peeves that we see sometimes with hiring managers, where you can be particularly focused on various things that really don't make a difference, and whether or not the person can actually do the job. Will they show up to the job? Some of the things that I've seen before is, oh, I saw a typo on their resume, so they automatically are pushed to a pile, the no pile, because they have a typo. But if you look at the totality of their resume, and you may have just missed out on a really good candidate to fill your role that can bring a different set of ideas and experience to the table. The other thing that I think that we often focus on sometimes is really hiring for our immediate needs, and maybe not even our long-term goals, or having a team built that will help us reach our goalposts. Some of those things I think about are, right now we need a secretary or administrative assistant to type up papers or support senior leadership. Over time, though, we may want that person's role to evolve even further. So think about that as you think about, can this person do the core responsibilities? And what types of skills are they bringing to the table that I may have some future needs for? Because then that person could be a little bit more versatile. And if you're forwardly thinking and you want that person to really progress in your organization, it's going to be really important that you also are offering an upward trajectory for them in that role. As they walk in, they'll be embraced and have the professional development and training that they need. One of the most important things that I've seen happen is that there's an exclusion of important voices at the table in our recruitment processes. Some of the things that I've seen have been not including individuals in the recruitment process that will be directly impacted by the work that the individual that you're hiring for, the position that you're hiring for, what they may need or what they may do. For example, if you have someone that is going to engage the community, I would think that it would make sense to potentially have a representative from the community help to identify the right person for the position. And that could be a local leader, that could be someone that is civically engaged in some way, that could be a part of your interviewing team. Or perhaps there's a partner that you work really closely with, that they could actually have a representative from their team come to the table and have a different voice that sheds light on what the role is and what will be required of that individual. This last one is a special case type of situation, but I often think that there are individuals who have been overlooked due to past convictions. And I would encourage you to think about your hiring processes, your policies and practices that are in place. If the past conviction is not related to the position, for example, if you worked at a bank and you have a conviction that is unrelated to, it's not a theft charge or embezzlement charge of some sort, then one of the best things to do is to really kind of think about what skills the individual can bring and not just solely look on the fact that they actually have a past conviction. A lot of times people have made mistakes, many of us have, and have moved past that and grown from that. So what you would be interested in if you were to interview a candidate like this that has a criminal past, that you would be more focused on what changes have they made since their conviction. So before we just completely bar people from positions, unless of course there are certain stipulations that would state that the person could not work in your facility as a result of their crime that they've committed. So being very open to those types of things. In order for us to truly understand and really think about some of the examples that I just gave, or start to think about creating an equitable culture, we have to really think about the interconnectedness between diversity, inclusion, and equity. And diversity is simply includes all of the ways in which people differ, encompassing different characteristics. They may make a one or a group of different, but be different from one another. While inclusion is about creating an environment with those groups of people from diversity in which the individual or the group can be and feel welcome, respected, supported, valued, and more importantly, being able to fully participate in the work that they're doing and the groups that they're part of and the organization as a whole. Equity is an extent beyond that. It is the fair treatment, the access, the opportunity, advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate the barriers that have prevented the full participation of particular groups in your organization. The one thing that's unique about it, your organization can definitely have diversity. And diversity is you're hired different types of people, they're working, but they're not working. You haven't created a culture where they feel like they can be included. So you only have the diversity piece of it. You can have an organization that is diverse and inclusive. However, it's not equitable. And what I mean by that is that you can definitely have different types of people working in a space where they feel welcome, but yet you have not taken that additional step to really think about, does everyone have fair access in the organization? Do they have fair treatment? Do they have this, are they offered the same types of opportunities? Can we examine why certain groups of people may not be as successful in this organization? What has prevented them from fully participating? And so those are the types of things. So I actually think that you can't have equity without having diversity and inclusion, but you could very well have diversity. You could also have inclusion. And that's just the uniqueness of the dynamic of diversity, equity, inclusion as you think about it in your workspace. So why are we focused on equity, and why is it so important for our employment practices and processes? First, one of the best things about that equity brings to the table is the ability to have achievement. And that is that every person within your organization is afforded the opportunity to give their best work and achieve. They believe that through their hard work, you're creating a culture where through their hard work, they will be acknowledged for their efforts and their ability, and they will really strive to be successful when you have a culture that is equitable. When you have a culture that's equitable, you'll have higher retention rates. Individuals will want to stay on board, come on board, grow with the organization, be more invested, see themselves with a bright future within the organization. You will also be able to attract different types of talent. Um, the more that people see environments where people are thriving or people are satisfied or happy or excited about the work that they're doing, it will be easier for you to identify other candidates that are similar. It really gets to a place of like, once you create this culture that is peaceful and harmonious and people are able to work in a particular space to reach a common goal, it will attract others in that same way. It becomes contagious. The more we begin to break down barriers or hidden agendas or issues within the workplace, we'll begin to acquire the right type of talent. It brings in a level of also diversity. And not just diversity of individuals, but and their backgrounds. It could also be diversity of thoughts coming into a place. It creates better perspectives, different perspectives, more experiences, more opportunities for brainstorming and problem solving and creating and being innovative and providing services, because you'll have different people from different walks of life coming into one place, focused on one common goal, which is the success of the organization and all the various roles that they could play to contribute to that particular success. Lastly, I would say too, the other thing that equity brings to the table is productivity. The more people are driven and feel as if they can achieve, the longer people stay on and that you don't have to be concerned about high turnover, the more that you're able to acquire the right type of talent for particular roles, the more that you have diversity of thought, you can't help but increase your bottom line and increase the type of productivity that you need for your organization to not only just exist, but to thrive. By having diverse people in one environment where their talents can be uplifted, your organization can climb to the roofs. And the moment that you begin to open the doors to include equity in your process, the better off your organization will be built, and it will be rooted in those things. As I think about equity and all of the things that we were just talking about when we talked about the different things that equity brings to an environment, we're thinking about, and as I'm talking about that through really a system change process. And a systems change process, I want to look at systems change, which is a theme that's been, really prevalent in the last years, but really think about it through an equity lens. Systems change is about shifting the mindsets, the narratives, the relationships, and the power and power to promote equity. It is really, really rooted in humanity. It's all about how we interact with one another. What value do we see in others? How do we appreciate their contributions to our workforce teams? It is really about how they see the world, how they process things. How can we, as an organization, become rooted in the individuality of individuals and allowing all of them to come to the table? It allows for different voices at the table. Who can contribute to a particular issue or thought process or strategy that we're looking to. I think oftentimes, we don't have the appropriate voices at the table, so we cannot drive the type of impact that our organizations want to have. But the more you have leadership that is diverse, from different backgrounds, from different age groups, from various people that you serve, from various constituents, the more you're going to be informed and create the best strategies for the greatest impact. The next thing is just having ability to really think about systems change, about balancing and redistributing power within the organization. Oftentimes in some structure, all of the power rests in upper management or with the board or with managers without allowing some level of contribution for teams to distribute or various employees to distribute or recipients of the work and service that you may be providing. How are their voices being heard? So it's allowing you to really think through ways to really distribute the power within the organization and really think about how can we empower more individuals. Perhaps you're going to have, if you're working perhaps with opportunity youth, those 16 to 24 that are out of work and out of school, how can you bring them to your leadership council to share what their experience has been? The more informed we are, the better off we're going to be. It also provides a way for us as we think about system change. It's about being very intentional about making a commitment to growth. Oftentimes in this work, you can't just do it at the job and go home and probably be the same person. This is the type of work when we start to think about systems change through an equity lens. It's really about how committed are you to growth, whether that is personal growth or professional growth. The more we grow as an individual that is committed to advancing equity, the more we will also grow professionally, because it will open up ourselves to really be able to signal those times where our biases or stereotypes are at work and how we can really think about ways to move forward. Systems change work requires long-term, sophisticated strategies. So you're going to need to have a diverse set of leadership at the table in order to create these long-term strategies. You need to create allies in the space with people from various backgrounds that have a common goal that can really think about how will we carry these goals out over the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and really be intentional about moving the needle forward. Oftentimes, it requires you going through an organizational assessment, an analysis of where you really are, where are the key areas, and there are lots of resources that you can find online that show you how to actually conduct an organizational assessment, leverage input from all members of your staff to really think about where's the work that we could be doing, and it's looking for those opportunities. It's also intersectional and deliberate. And really what that means is that systems change work is often overlapping and happens in buckets of work and pockets of work, but also there's a connectedness of each one of those buckets of work with the individuals that are leading those projects or serving on those projects. So how can you think about what are the connection or what is the intersectionality of each one of those pieces to make sure that they're all functioning together? You should keep in mind, though, that this is an ongoing process. Systems change work requires making some changes, testing some things out, seeing what worked, assessing again to see if there's been improvement, and continuing on with that process. I'm going to transition a little bit. And for this presentation, I know that we are set to really talk about recruitment processes and hiring practices. The one thing I think about, though, is we're going to kind of start with the end in mind. Our goal is to really have the best retention practices, or the best retention numbers. So in order to do that, which I think will have a drastic impact on the way in which you recruit or how you recruit or what you're prepared to recruit for, is really understanding the concepts of inclusion and creating the conditions so that people want to come into the space. If we're going to revisit a little bit the one definition on inclusion, and that is creating an environment in which individuals or group can be and feel welcome, respected, and fully able to participate. And I'm going to argue that if your environment is not inclusive, or they don't, or candidates don't see a sense of belonging, or your employees don't don't see that, they're less likely to stay. So you're starting your recruitment process all over again. It's a revolving door. So I would invite you to really think about, how do you create environments that are inclusive? And some of the levers that you really want to push or pull when you are thinking about creating an inclusive environment is bringing everyone to the table so that it's very clear about the type of culture you want to create. The culture is going to be impacted by all of these people listed here, your senior leadership, all the way to your partners, all the way to the community or the clients in which you may serve, your managers, your colleagues, board of directors. Those, the culture is set and dictated by norms that exist, by interactions that people have, by experiences. So you want to make sure that you have every level of your organization engaged in developing or creating a welcoming culture. Some of the things that you really want to think about when you're thinking about creating a community that is belonging and has an environment that is really focused on making sure that everyone feels welcome and included is that, number one, you want to be mission driven. The first thing is that you really need to think through, what does your mission and vision say about your organization? Are there goals for diversity, equity, inclusion embedded within the mission statement? Or are there equity statements that really spell out what you hope to accomplish and setting the tone so that everyone across the organization or anyone that may be considering applying for a position is understands the values that your organization has set? The next thing would be really setting a tone, creating the space for people to feel included and belong. And some of the ways that you will be able to do that is by setting a culture where there are feedback loops. If you're having a meeting, have you given it a time for people to process the information? Have you given it a space for people to raise their concerns or their thoughts and it be accepted? Have you thought through some other ways that I've seen this happen is, have you really thought through how you might develop teams or how people work together, making sure that everyone has value and their voice is heard within the organization. Commit to learning. As I mentioned before, that this is a long-term process. This idea of advancing equity, whether it's in your recruitment process or in your organization as a whole, you have to be committed to learning. You have to be committed to learning about one another. So creating spaces where there are opportunities for your employees to really share with each other, have personal time with each other. Sometimes I've seen that through happy hour where there are games. Sometimes I've seen it where individuals there's partners that you're paired with while you're working together. So on your first day, you have someone that you're going to go to lunch with. Perhaps it's really kind of even built into your team dynamics and what you might share and how you might share. I would also just even encourage really taking the time to ask various employees, what more would you want to learn? Encourage people to go to lunch or spend time with different people, pairing people in various ways so that they're able to learn from each other and they've created that particular space. And then there's this idea of connecting to understand. You know, oftentimes we create a space, and we've seen this, we've heard the typical lunchroom phrases before where you see an image and you have a diverse culture, but no one is really sitting together. No one is seeking to understand. So making sure that you have moments where people have an opportunity to say who they are, what they bring to the table, what strengths do they offer, what areas of opportunities do they have, so that your staff has an opportunity to connect to each other, to understand one another, and where there are misunderstandings or need for support, they will raise their hand to possibly engage with one another and get the right types of support. You have, and this is one of the things like around creating this culture. If you're a person that is hiring or has any role in the hiring recruitment process within your organization, it's really important that you think through what power lies in your hands. And so I wanted to spend some time just kind of thinking through this a little bit. And that is, it's like you have the power truly to change the culture in which you manage or control or take part in. And some of that may be bringing in different voices and perspectives to the process, bringing different voices and perspectives to the organization. How are you recruiting? Are you recruiting for a different voice than what is already on the team? Are you recruiting for a different perspective? So you want to understand your culture, your organizational culture. You also want to understand the norms within your organization, what pieces are missing, what values, what skill sets, and can those individuals that you're recruiting for, will they embody some of the diversity that you're really looking for on the team? You have the ability to grant opportunities. In so many cases, individuals, people of color are not granted positions for various reasons. Maybe they don't have the same experience, the same years of experience, or same educational background. You have the ability to grant opportunities and then work with those individuals to ensure that they're going to get the most support as they move forward. Additionally, you have the opportunity to be a change agent. And really what that means is change the culture, change the environment, change the communities that you serve, change the organizations that you support. Really begin to think about the more diverse we have, the more inclusive we are, the more equitable we are, the more we're all will be in a better place. Communities will be in a better place, individuals will be in a better place. Of course, you have the ability, with that being said, to impact individual lives. I've worked in a position before where there were young men who were returning citizens who had been incarcerated for long periods of time. They had developed the skills, they'd traveled back and forth from a program for 12 months, gotten all what they needed, but because of the color of their skin, in some cases they were not accepted. And although that wasn't said aloud, we understood what it was. It was a culture that they were going into a field that was predominantly white. And so there were some things that needed to be understood. But once they were on the job, once we, worked behind the scenes to make sure that there was diversity, equity, and inclusion training, that those individuals were onboarded and working in their jobs, you as a recruiting person will see the impact that you've had on another person's life. They were able to get cars and homes, and it just changed the trajectory of an entire family just based on having access and opportunity. It promotes this level of liberation. Like, I can escape my previous circumstances if I were just given a chance or an opportunity. So the more that we can open up our eyes to see the assets that a person brings to an organization, the better off we're going to be in helping them to be a part of a diverse, inclusive, and equitable culture, which is what we want. Now I want to just transition and talk with you about the recruitment cycle and how we can create some equitable practices within that cycle. Recruiting with intention is one of the key things that we must do. Recruitment requires a lot of work. And if you've ever been in a space where you were looking for that right candidate for the right role, sometimes it could take you several months. Some of the things that you need to be prepared for if you're going to recruit with intention on being equitable, you're going to need the time and the commitment. You're going to need a shared understanding among your management team, among your recruitment team. You're going to already have to have created an inclusive culture, because if you do all the work of recruiting an individual, you definitely want to make sure that they will stay on with the organization and grow. And then when you're hiring a diverse set of candidates, you want to make sure that there are a diversity of supports for that individual. Whether it is you hired someone and they didn't exactly have all of the experience that you were looking for or for the qualifications. However, you believe that they can grow in this role. You want to create those opportunities right away. You want to connect them with a mentor. You want to provide them with a buddy system or develop a buddy system where they can engage with people that are similar to them or have the same passions as them. It requires you, however, to know a little bit about the staff if you're going to recruit for particular positions. From an external standpoint of things, you need to have a certain level of awareness and exposure and elevation that people know that you exist and that you're hiring. And don't be afraid to say that you want to hire for diversity and what your organization stands for and how they want to have an equitable environment. People want to hear that because then they can feel free that they can refer individual candidates to you. You want to have a diverse set of networks and partnerships. A lot of times we're very siloed and we work within our organization. We don't take the time to think about organizations that are similar to ours, maybe that are different, maybe that are across sectors, maybe that individuals that are a part of local government or local leadership. How are we building our web of partnerships? Those that we can share a position description with and they can identify the right types of candidates. If you're in a particular community, you should definitely know all the community-based organizations in that area. You should also know colleges and universities that are local to you that are hiring with a particular skill set that you can come in and potentially talk to them about your role, the role that you're hiring for or your organization. Attend their career fairs and career days so that they know that your organization exists. You want to also consider diverse set of professional organization and affiliations. And really that means that, if there are certain certifications that you're looking for a particular role, be sure to contact organizations that have diversity as a priority for them, that are looking for individuals to move from maybe a graduate level to their next position or undergraduate level to their first position. You want to also just really truly engage all local organizations. I cannot stress that enough. A lot of times there's just hidden talent that's in communities. You want to use word of mouth in so many cases. I think also the more that people are aware of what you represent or what your organization represents, it will become a buzz organization and I say buzz, I mean that people want to work there. They want to be a part of the organization. Recruiting with intention also requires, if you have the prerequisites, you're going to need a process. You really need a diverse interview team. It needs to be people, not just diverse as far as race, but you also want diversity as far as level within the organization, maybe even skill set, different people that they may engage with. For example, if it is a group of individuals that the role will support, perhaps having one of them be a part of your management team. You want to have diversity of thought on the management team, on the interview team, sorry. You want to have a well-defined recruitment strategy, including all of those external partners that I named on the previous slide. But then also you want to engage your current employees and determine if they know particular candidates. Because once again, if you've created an inclusive culture and they're happy with where they're working, they will probably have other people that are just waiting in line for a position to open up at your organization. You definitely want to develop long-term and short-term goals and identify what are the qualifications needed for the short term as well as your long term. This last one is a very, very key. Sometimes we want particular qualifications, and I would argue that sometimes skill set is really what you're looking for. Think about the qualifications that you have for any particular position. What is this position really asking for? What other skills can I actually map to this particular qualification so that I can have a diverse set of candidates? Just because people prepare their resumes differently, not all people use the same words, use the same language. Language is very important. And so as you're reading through resumes or as you're talking with candidates over the phone or as you're meeting candidates, think about the various different qualifications that they may have. So I would invite you to really kind of think through, do I need just this certain qualification? Or is the skill set really what I'm looking for? And maybe I can ask the details around how they develop that skill set that will help me to know that they're qualified for the position. As far as interviews, you want to immediately follow up. We don't want you to miss out on any candidates that may be interested in your position. And so sometimes we have a candidate pool where we have so many applications that we have that we're paddling together, and then we're going to start making calls on one day. I want to invite you to think about potentially, as resumes come in, begin to really take the time, set the time aside to really review. And as you review, make your phone calls accordingly. Let candidates know that you're interested in them. Sometimes we approach this process as if it's not a conversation and a relationship starter, because that's what an interview process should look like. It should be the candidate getting to know your organization and you getting to know the candidate, but you want to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what you represent, and you want them to show you what they represent. So the more people you have at the table also helps with that. Also, in some recruiting practices, we have not directly reached out to candidates. If you hear about someone that you think could be good for the role, but they did not apply, perhaps they didn't know about the position, feel free to reach out. I think one of the best sources is using a source like LinkedIn. Contact individuals who you believe, oh, you have this experience, you have experience, you have a background in this particular subject area. I would love to really just talk with you. We have an opening, or perhaps they may know other folks that have an opening that could be beneficial for you to speak with. You want to also review your interview questions. As I've discussed before, language is important. Sometimes English is not someone's first language, and so they may say things differently than what you're used to. Being careful to think about, what word choice am I using when I'm asking questions? Am I asking a question that will really get me at the answer that I'm looking for? One of the questions that we hear so often is, tell me a little bit about yourself. And so often I've been in interviews and individuals will tell their personal story, how many children they have, how old they are. And I think just a twist to that question of, tell me a little bit about yourself in regards to your work experience. That shifts the conversation a little bit. So the more people that you have at the table from diverse backgrounds, helping you to review your questions, the better off you're going to be at making sure you're asking the right questions. I would also encourage, ask behavioral interview questions. It allows for you to think through, take the candidate back to a particular time that they carried out a particular task, or perhaps how they overcame a particular challenge. So do your best. There's a lot of research that's available on behavioral interview questions. Choose some that will fit the position in which you're hiring for. I would say definitely conduct telephone interviews. It allows you to get to know someone before seeing them and judging them through your own lens of things. So it takes away some of the biases that it may exist, some stereotypes, and you can really get to know. But make sure that your telephone interview is more than just a few screener questions about whether or not you want them to move on to the next step. That's one of the primary goals of the telephone interview. However, what other things could you gain from talking with them that would help you to be better positioned for the next step in the interview process? And as a rule of thumb, share your organization's dress code. When individuals apply for a position and they're invited to an interview, they really may not know what the culture of your organization is. And so often I've seen people shunned away primarily because they weren't dressed appropriately. And I'm not speaking about, wearing casual attire, but they weren't suited or they weren't polished in a certain way. And you would be surprised at how your interview team may view different people. So make that decision earlier on what you're going to share with a candidate so they have the best chances of being successful when they sit down. The selection process, design and orientation with diverse employees. Have your new employee meet with as many individuals on the first day as possible, or within the first week or month, depending on how your organization is structured. Have ongoing training opportunities for them, where they're either learning in a paired state where they're working with one individual, perhaps they're shadowing or following someone, or there is corporate trainings that are happening where they're getting they're understanding the culture, the work that they have to do, and their relationship to those things. Work with storytelling introductions. I love storytelling introductions because it allows me to have a personal connection with someone that I didn't think that I would. And it could be as simple as tell me your name, the last book that you read, your favorite color, your favorite place to eat. What was your favorite thing to do growing up? It centers people in a way rather than thinking about their differences, they're thinking about their similarities. Definitely create a buddy system if you can. And that is just connecting various people with various people across the organization that you work for. If there's just 5 people, everyone should have an opportunity to go out, have lunch together, have coffee together, and build that out in a day within a month. In your first 90 days, I would expect you to have 30-minute conversations with at least 3 people. Just something so that they begin to feel like they can share. And then you can really help your existing employees kind of cultivate an understanding of what they should be asking in that on those lunch dates or coffee breaks. Schedule lunch for the first day. People love to feel welcomed in that way. Design various shadowing opportunities. It's a great opportunity for someone to learn, capture notes, look for inequities perhaps that did or inconsistencies in work that's happening, get feedback. It increases the feedback loop. And then always schedule first day check-ins and first week check-ins. So at the end of the day, you want to have your manager or someone from the buddy system or someone from HR check in with that person also by the end of the week, and then continuously within the first few months. You want to try to create an environment where they're going to feel a sense of belonging, that is being cultivated, and that they will want to stay on and be a part of the organization on a long-term basis. That is really the nuts and bolts. We didn't have a ton of time to talk through all of the different elements, but I think this could be a really good start for you as you think about creating an equitable culture, realizing number one, that it's going to start with creating the environment for people to belong. And that often starts with the systems change approach. From that point, you want to start to think about the different partners or avenues that you can take to ensure that you're creating a space where people from all different backgrounds feel like they are welcome within your organization. And then also just really thinking about what particular strategies can you continue to think through? How can your organization become more equitable? And think about the important role that you will play as a recruiter or someone on the recruitment team. I thank you for your time today. I hope this was good information for you. Please feel free to reach me through the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance website, this Elevate Conference. My contact information has been provided. Thank you so much for your time.